So you're tuning in because you want to cut through the noise, right? You've got this pile of information, maybe feeling a bit swamped, and you just want the key takeaways, the stuff that really matters.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we do here. We've been digging through a fresh set of sources, so you have to.
For this deep dive, we've got, well, quite a mix.
We do. First up, there's a news roundup from electoral-vote.com, dated May 12th, 2025. Gives us that political pulse.
Okay.
And we're pairing that with the mid-quarter investment outlook for Q2 2025. That's from Hedgeye Risk Management. So an economic lens, too.
Exactly. Our mission really is to pull out the critical political stuff, the economic developments from both of these.
Right. We're hunting for those surprising bits.
Yeah.
The connections maybe you wouldn't spot otherwise, things that give you that deeper understanding.
Okay, let's dive in.
Okay.
And we are starting with a political story that definitely made me do a double take.
Oh, yeah. This electoral-vote.com piece leads with a pretty wild headline. Today in grift, Qatar allegedly plans to donate Air Force One. I mean, right away, that sparks questions. We're talking a $400 million luxury Boeing 747-8. And the idea is the Qatari royal family wants to hand it over to the Trump administration to replace Air Force One.
Right. And Trump, of course, he jumped on Truth Social with his take.
Naturally.
Calling it a gift free of charge for the Defense Department. A temporary fix, he says, for the 40-year-old Air Force One. And, blaming the crooked Democrats for wanting to pay top dollar for a new one.
It's a standard playbook, isn't it? Frame himself as the great deal maker, saving taxpayer cash.
But when you actually look closer...
Yeah, the situation gets, well, let's say murky and pretty concerning, frankly.
How so?
It's not like a simple handover to the U.S. government. The reporting suggests the plane's only being loaned while Trump's in office.
Loaned, okay.
And here's the kicker.
Yeah.
The plan, apparently, is for ownership to then transfer to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation after he leaves office.
Whoa, okay. That's different. Because you think of, the Air Force One at the Reagan Library. It's just sitting there.
Exactly. But that one's non-functional. It's basically a museum piece.
Uh-huh.
And it belongs to the National Archives.
Yeah.
So the federal government owns it.
Right.
This Qatari jet, though,
Right.
fully functional. And it would belong to a foundation tied directly to Donald J. Trump.
So even if the foundation technically owns it, he basically gets a personal super luxury jet after his presidency, paid for by Qatar.
That seems to be the implication. Which, immediately makes you think about the emoluments clause.
Right, the constitutional thing about presidents not taking gifts from foreign powers.
Exactly.
And A.G. Pambondi weighed in.
She did. Her view is that it doesn't violate the clause because it's not tied to a specific official act. But, you have to ask.
Yeah, can you really see a nearly $500 million plane changing hands and not think there's some expectation? Maybe favorable treatment for Qatar down the line, maybe something on tariffs.
It's a fair question. And the reactions are all over the place. Democrats are, predictably, apoplectic, according to the report. But it's not just them. Some MAGA Republicans are apparently unhappy, too. Mostly because of Qatar's ties with Iran, which they strongly oppose.
Interesting. So pushback from both sides, potentially?
Yeah, the Republican members of Congress are mostly quiet. But MAGA pundits like Laura Loomer, they're criticizing it publicly.
And then Qatar itself put out a statement.
Right, calling the news premature. Which could mean a few things. Maybe it's an out for Trump if things get too hot. Or, maybe more likely, it means the details of what Qatar gets in return, they're still being hammered out. Possibly during Trump's upcoming trip, which, by the way, is his first foreign trip since taking office.
Okay, so still very much in flux. But the implications, if this does go through...
Huge.
Yeah.
It could basically gut the emoluments clause, right?
Yeah.
Set a precedent where foreign money flows in through these foundation structures.
Yeah.
It potentially opens the door to, more influence, maybe even bribery.
Is there any chance Congress or the courts step in?
The report suggests that's unlikely. It actually says the best hope to stop it might be political pressure.
Yeah.
From the right wing.
Wow. Okay. Let's switch gears then. From luxury jets to drug prices.
Right. Trump announced a new executive order. Big promises. Cutting prescription drug prices by 30% to 80%.
30 to 80%? Ow.
Through something called a most favored nations policy. But, it raises that immediate question.
Yeah, the piece points us out. If it's that easy, just signing an order, why hasn't anyone, including Trump himself before, already done it?
Exactly. So the report floats three possibilities, none too optimistic.
Okay.
1, Trump's the first president not beholden to Big Pharma, which, given his history, seems unlikely. 2, the order is actually unlawful. like other attempts that got shot down in court.
Possible.
Or 3, the actual change is pretty small and the talk of trillions of dollars in savings is just, well, hype.
Trillions. Is that even feasible?
Well, the U.S. spends a lot on drugs, but trillions in savings implies something massive and immediate. It's more likely any savings, if they happen, would be much smaller and take longer to show up. Yeah. Big gap between the claim and the probable reality.
Got it. Okay, moving on to some political commentary. This time about J.D. Vance.
Yeah, apparently he tried to tell a joke during a press conference about the World Cup. Something referencing Secretary Noam and visitors overstaying their welcome.
Oh, boy. How did that go over?
Like a lead balloon, apparently. It just fell completely flat.
Why? I mean, what was the issue?
Well, the electoral vote piece makes a good point. With everything going on around immigration and deportations, it's not really joking matter for a lot of people. It comes off as insensitive, out of touch.
Yeah, I can see that.
But the deeper analysis here is about authenticity. The report suggests Vance is trying to copy Trump's style, his rhetoric.
Trying to be Trump.
Yeah, but it feels forced. Like, people might disagree with Trump, but his supporters often feel he means what he says. With Vance, it supposedly lacks that genuine feel. A bit like the critique of Ron DeSantis trying the same thing.
Ah, okay. So the prediction is this inauthenticity might hurt him if he, say, runs for president later.
That's the idea. That struggle to seem authentic, to really connect with the base in that Trump-like way, could be a real hurdle.
Interesting. Voters can often sniff that out, can't they, when someone's trying too hard to be something they're not?
Absolutely. Perceived conviction matters, even if you disagree with the substance.
All right, let's shift focus now to the actual working part of Washington, or maybe the lack thereof in some cases. We have 2 reports here under Workin' 9 to 5. First up, FBI Director Kash Patel.
Right. NBC News had a report alleging that Patel, who's a political appointee, is cutting corners, not fully engaged.
What are the specific claims?
Pretty specific, actually. Daily briefings, down to just twice a week, apparently because he's often late. Weekly Zoom calls with law enforcement leaders across the country. Canceled. And there are even claims that briefers find it hard to keep his attention, sometimes needing to use pictures. Similar to what was reported about briefing Trump.
Wow. And something about travel.
Yeah. The report alleges frequent use of government planes for, let's say, less than official trips. Nashville, Las Vegas, New York City mentioned.
And Patel's response?
He and his allies are pushing back hard, calling it a hit piece, offering other explanations for his schedule and travel, standard counterattack.
So who do you believe?
Well, you always consider the source, potential bias. But the electoral vote analysis kind of suggests the truth is likely somewhere in the middle, probably leaning towards NBC's version having some substance. Raises real questions about his engagement, at least.
Okay. And the second Workin' 9 to 5 item is about Senator John Fetterman.
Yeah, some unflattering reports there, too, from New York Magazine and NBC News, focusing on his work habits and what they call increasingly erratic behavior.
Erratic. What's the evidence they cite for lack of engagement first?
Quite a bit, actually. A high number of missed Senate votes since April 2024. Very little committee attendance, people having trouble scheduling meetings with him. Not many public appearances back in Pennsylvania.
Okay. Those are measurable things.
Right. They suggest, a lower level of participation.
And the erratic behavior claims?
Those are more concerning. Reports of an increased temper, being more isolated socially, and maybe some conspiratorial thinking, especially about why he's being criticized, linking it to his views on Israel.
And his explanation?
He pushes back to, of course. Says it's because he's an outsider, that he prioritizes the important votes and campaigning. He claims his health is good. And he suggests it's really about left-wing anger over his stance on Israel and his relationship with Trump.
But there was also a letter.
Yes, that's significant. A leaked letter from someone described as a former supporter and staffer.
And what did it say?
It detailed some really worrying stuff. Potential issues with sticking to his medication regimen, the conspiratorial thoughts again, what the letter calls megalomania regarding Israel, mood swings, apparent lying.
Oh.
And the report makes a point of saying the author leans centrist, presumably to counterclaims it's just a political attack. It paints a picture that seems to go beyond just work-style differences.
How are his Senate colleagues reacting?
It's mixed. Some Democrats are expressing support, sympathy, but interestingly, some Republicans, Cotton, Grassley, Dave McCormick are mentioned, have defended him quite strongly.
Republicans defending him, why?
Speculation ranges from maybe genuine empathy to perhaps political calculation, hoping maybe he'd consider switching parties. It's complex.
Yeah, it sounds like a really tough situation, personally and politically. The intersection of health, high office, party politics.
Definitely underscores all those pressures.
Yeah.
And the different reactions show how tricky these things are to navigate in the Senate spotlight.
Okay, let's move south to Georgia. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she decided not to run for Senate against Jon Ossoff.
Right. And if you follow Georgia politics, this probably isn't a huge surprise.
Why not?
The analysis points to three main problems for her. First, while she's strong in her district, her statewide popularity among Republicans, reportedly low.
Okay.
Second, polling against Ossoff, especially with independent voters, weak.
Right.
And third, maybe the killer. Lack of support, maybe even opposition from Republican leadership.
So even she saw the writing on the wall.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Looks like a pragmatic move, maybe some self-preservation, deciding to stay in her safe house seat instead of risking a tough statewide race.
Who might run instead then?
Names like Raffensperger, John King, Chris Carr are floated. But interestingly, the polling right now shows generic Republican actually does best against Ossoff.
Huh. So it's less about the specific candidate right now?
It highlights the challenge any individual Republican might face, and maybe the underlying partisan balance in Georgia. It's a strategic calculation, for sure.
All right. Now this next one is, well, it's disturbing. Federal judges getting hundreds of unsolicited pizzas.
Yeah, across at least 7 states. It sounds almost like a prank, but the context is really chilling.
It makes it so chilling.
3 things the report highlights. 1, the timing. It started after January 20th. 2, many pizzas were addressed to Daniel Andrel.
That name sounds familiar.
He was the son of Judge Esther Salas. He was killed in an attack targeting her by a disgruntled lawyer.
Oh, my God.
Okay, and 3, there's a pattern. Judges getting these pizzas, often right after ruling against the Trump administration.
So the message is intimidation.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Reminder, we know where you are, you're vulnerable. And apparently some deliveries even went to judges' relatives, who likely don't have security details.
That's awful. Just pure menace.
It is. And while, sure, most people sending these probably won't act violently themselves.
It only takes one.
Exactly. Yeah. One unstable person seeing this as a signal or encouragement. It's a really worrying trend for the judiciary.
Oh.
Highlights the polarization and potential for real threats.
Definitely concerning for judicial safety and independence. Okay, let's make a pretty significant shift now to the economy. We're digging into the Hedgeye Risk Management Q2 mid-quarter report.
Right. Moving from politics to data-driven economic analysis. Hedgeye uses their GIP model growth, inflation, policy.
Okay.
And their current take is that the U.S. economy is in Quad 4.
Quad 4, what does that mean in their system?
Quad 4 is when economic growth is slowing down and inflation is slowing down or decelerating at the same time.
Okay, growth down, inflation down. What does that usually imply?
Typically means the Fed or monetary policy leans more dovish, easier money. And the market narrative shifts towards deflation or at least disinflation.
Does the report give specific numbers?
Yeah, they have projections for U.S. real GDP growth, headline CPI inflation year over year. They use their short-term nowcast models and also these enhanced comparative base effects models. They lay out specific estimates for Q2 2025.
So we know where they think we are right now.
Right. Although, interestingly, their monthly inflation tracker showed that disinflation stalled a bit in early May. A little pause in the downward trend.
What about looking further ahead, beyond this quarter?
Their forecast for the next 12 months shows a shift. They see us moving out of Quad 4 in Q2 into Quad 3 in Q3.
Which is?
Quad 3 is growth slowing, but inflation accelerating.
Okay.
And then into Quad 2 in Q4.
And Quad 2.
That's growth accelerating and inflation accelerating.
Yeah.
So they expect the whole growth inflation mix to change significantly over the rest of the year. Their GDP nowcast table breaks down the indicators driving this.
Got it. Do they look globally too?
Yep. There's a G20 GIP model summary. It shows how the U.S. fits into the picture with other major economies, looking at growth and inflation for Q1 and Q2. And they briefly touch on their investment positions, longs, shorts, across different timeframes.
Okay, so what are the big macro themes they're focused on for Q2?
The first one is basically, when does USA's Quad 4 bottom out?
Okay.
They look at things like import container volume from China.
Any market signals?
Oh, yeah. They highlight some really interesting ones. Record high share of options trading in those zero data expiration contracts, zero DTE, super short-term speculation. And the biggest gap between what the market expects volatility to be versus what it actually has been since the global financial crisis.
Yeah.
Huge uncertainty signal there.
Anything else?
Record high growth and tariff revenue year over year. Big strengthening in the Taiwan dollar. also the largest drop ever recorded in the outlook for stocks, and the second biggest jump in expectations for rising unemployment.
So a lot of indicators pointing down or showing stress.
Pretty much. They also talk about this sloth cycle concept, like the economy's in this late cycle stasis.
Sloth cycle, how do they measure that?
Looking at trends like fewer overtime hours, less temporary staffing, lower rates of people quitting or being hired, all signs of a cooling labor market.
Okay.
And a key point, consumption capacity, basically. People's ability to spend is at a 50-month low in terms of its rate of change. Aggregate salary and wage growth is slowing down, weakening demand.
That paints a pretty clear picture for the U.S. What's the second theme?
That one's, when does global Quad 2 top? So shifting focus internationally.
Quad 2, again, that's accelerating growth and inflation.
Exactly. They see potential for inflation picking up elsewhere, especially the Eurozone, partly because the comparisons to last year get easier. That's the base effects idea.
Okay.
They also note yield curves steepening worldwide, and they mention being long. Some European markets like Poland, Switzerland, the Eurozone itself, suggest they expect a different story unfolding outside the U.S.
And the third theme sounds political again.
It connects back, yeah. Timing Trump tariffs versus tax cuts. They look at the stated positions of the U.S. and China on trade, the current tariff rates.
Which are high, historically speaking.
Extremely high. They mention the U.S. effective tariff rate is the highest it's been in 125 years. And trade policy uncertainty is at record highs.
Wow. So how does this timing work out in their view?
They frame 2025 as pain first, reward later, quoting Trump and economist James Besant, suggesting the real economic bite from policies might hit in the next 6-12 months, the goal being to re-privatize the economy.
So induce some economic pain early on.
That seems to be the theory, sequencing the pain vis the reward. The idea might be, take the hit in 2025, which then sets up easier comparisons for potential economic reacceleration in 2026, fueled by tax cuts.
Timed nicely for the midterm elections, perhaps.
One could certainly infer that. It suggests a very strategic, politically aware approach to economic policy timing.
So wrapping this all up, wow, we covered a lot, from that wild Qatari plane story and what it means for emoluments.
Yeah, to the skepticism around those big drug price cut promises.
A whole authenticity question with politicians like Vance. The questions about officials like Patel and Fetterman actually doing the work.
Right, and the political calculations behind someone like MTG not running for Senate, plus that really disturbing pizza intimidation trend against judges.
And then capping it off with that detailed hedge-eye economic forecast, anticipating this shift through different economic quads driven by policy, especially trade.
It really shows how intertwined the political maneuvers and the economic outlook are right now. You can't really separate them.
Definitely. So here's something to chew on. Hedge-eye, and apparently the administration itself, seem to anticipate some economic pain in 2025. How does that square with the political climate? We talked about public reactions, pressures. Will the promise of a 2026 rebound be enough to manage those headwinds?
That's a great question. Or maybe you want to dig deeper into history. Look at past periods with really high trade uncertainty, like now. How did the economy actually perform then? Could be revealing.
Lots to think about. And remember, if you've got your own stack of sources you want us to tackle,
Yeah, send them over. We're always ready for the next deep dive.